Story 1. The Groundskeeper's Last Shift. Ray had worked at Calverton Cemetery for 19 years. He knew every section, every row, every stone that had settled at an angle over the years and needed checking after heavy rain. He knew which graves got flowers regularly and which ones never did. He knew which family plots had been bought but not yet used, waiting quietly for the people whose names would eventually go on the stone. He knew which sections smelled of cut grass in summer and which ones stayed damp through October because of the drainage. He knew the cemetery the way you knew a place when you had spent 19 years alone in it. At all hours, in all weathers. He had started as a seasonal worker. He had stayed. 19 years later, he was the senior groundskeeper. He was not a man who frightened easily. The cemetery had never frightened him. He had been walking it alone after dark since his second year, locking the gates at dusk, checking the perimeter, checking that nobody had come in during the day and stayed past closing. It happened occasionally. Grief did strange things to people. Sometimes people needed to be in a particular place past the time the gates were supposed to close. He had found people sitting beside graves at 10 p.m., at midnight, once. He always handled it gently. He understood what the place meant to people. He just needed them to leave so he could lock up. It was a Thursday in October when it happened, his last shift before a 2-week holiday. He had been looking forward to it for 3 months. His wife had booked a cottage in the Lake District, 2 weeks away from the cemetery. He had been counting down. He did his closing check at 6:30 p.m., walked the perimeter in the order he always did. West Gate first, locked. North Gate, locked. Then across the cemetery to the east section and the main entrance. The cemetery in October at 6:30 p.m. was almost dark. The sky still held a line of pale light above the tree line to the west. Everything else was settling into the dark the way the cemetery always did in autumn, quick and complete. He had his torch. He knew the layout well enough to walk it without one, but he used it. He was halfway across the cemetery on the gravel path through the east section when he heard it. A single footstep, behind him, on the gravel. He stopped. He turned. The path was empty. The cemetery stretched back behind him in the early dark. Still, quiet. He waited. Nothing. He turned back toward the main entrance. He had taken 3 steps when he heard it again. Another footstep, gravel shifting, behind him, same distance back as before. He turned again. Empty. He stood on the path and looked back the full length of it. 100 feet of gravel path lined with headstones. Nothing moving, no shape, no figure. Ray was not someone who panicked. He stopped walking. He cataloged what he had heard, gravel shifting, twice, behind him. Source not identified. He stood on the path and considered the options the way he had considered things for 19 years in that cemetery. Methodically, without panic. An animal cutting across the gravel, a fox possibly. They moved through after dark sometimes, the wind moving through the dried wreaths and plastic flower arrangements on the nearby graves. They rustled sometimes in a way that sounded almost like footsteps. His own footsteps echoing off the stone boundary wall that ran along the east side of the cemetery. Stone walls did strange things to sound. He considered each one. He decided on the echo. He started walking. The footsteps started immediately. The same pace as his own. He stopped. They stopped. He stood completely still in the early dark. The cemetery around him, the headstones, the wall, the path. Silence. He started walking again. They started again. He stopped. They stopped. He waited 30 seconds without moving. Then he started walking slowly. They started slowly. He walked faster. They walked faster. He stopped dead. They stopped dead. He stood there on that gravel path and felt something move through him that he could not immediately name. He named it a moment later. Fear. 19 years in that cemetery. He had never felt it before. He turned around fully and walked back the way he had come. He walked quickly. He did not run. He told himself this clearly as he was doing it. He was not running. He walked quickly back to the maintenance building and went inside and locked the door behind him. He sat at the desk. He noticed his hands were not entirely steady. He noted that with some surprise and a small amount of embarrassment. Then he picked up the phone and called Dave. He called his colleague Dave, who had already finished his shift and was home. He described what had happened. Dave was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "It's the Morrison path." Ray asked what he meant. "The gravel section by the east boundary. The Morrison family plot is at the end of it." Ray knew the Morrison plot. A large family grave going back to the 1880s. "What about it?" Ray said. Dave was quiet again. "This is going to sound stupid," Dave said. Ray said, "Tell me." 3 times, Dave said, in 4 years. 3 different members of staff, all on the same path, all heard the same thing. Ray had worked alongside 2 of those people. He had never heard any of this. Ray waited. Footsteps behind them that matched their own pace. Ray sat in the maintenance office with the phone against his ear. "Why didn't you tell me?" he said. Dave said, "You've been here 19 years, and it never happened to you. We figured it just didn't happen to everyone." Ray locked up from inside the maintenance building that night. He did not do the final perimeter check. He had done it every working day for 19 years. He did not do it that night. He told me that when he came back from his holiday, he walked that path again, in daylight first, on a busy Saturday morning when there were visitors in the cemetery and the gates were open and everything felt ordinary. He walked the full length of the Morrison path slowly. He stopped in the middle of it. He listened. Nothing. He started walking. Nothing. He repeated it 6 more times over the following weeks. Different times of day, different weather. Always nothing. Then he came back on a Thursday evening in November, at the same hour, same light, same conditions as close as he could reproduce them. He walked the Morrison path. Nothing. He has not heard it again. He told me he does not know what he heard that October. He has spent 2 years on the rational explanation. The echo off the east boundary wall is the most convincing one, but he tested it. He clapped at various points along the path and listened for the echo. The echo came from the wall to his right, not from behind him. He said, "Whatever was walking behind me was not an echo." He retired 18 months after that shift. He said it wasn't the footsteps. He said he had been planning to retire anyway. He said it with the slightly careful delivery of someone saying something they are not entirely sure is true. I did not push him on it. I understood. Some things you keep testing until you find the rational explanation. And some things you decide to leave where they are. Ray had decided some answers were not worth finding. Story 2, What She Saw Between the Stones. This story is about a woman named Petra. Petra was 26 when this happened. She was a photographer. Seriously, if not professionally, she had developed an interest in cemetery photography. The light in old cemeteries was specific and beautiful. She had shot in 4 cemeteries before this one without incident. This was a Victorian-era cemetery in the north of England, established 1871. She had permission to shoot outside public hours and a contact number for the site manager. She arrived at 7:04 a.m. on a Sunday in November, before the gates opened to the public. She parked on the road outside and walked to the side entrance the site manager had given her a key for. The cemetery in November at 7 a.m. was different from the cemetery in summer daylight. The trees were stripped, the light was low and gray and coming in at a flat angle that barely cleared the eastern wall. The older headstones caught it on their faces and the shadows fell backward and long. It was exactly what she had come for. That quality of light. The kind that made carved Victorian stone look like it was lit from within rather than from without. She spent the first 2 hours working the Victorian section at the far end of the cemetery. She was completely alone. The cemetery would not open to the public until 9. She was aware of the silence. The specific silence of a large outdoor space in early November before anyone else has arrived in it. Not the silence of emptiness, something more present than that, like a room that has been occupied for a long time and retains the quality of occupation even when no one is in it. She had been in enough cemeteries to recognize it. She was comfortable with it. She moved through the Victorian section methodically, shot from low angles, shot with the light directly behind the stones, shot looking east into the sunrise. By 8:30, she had the Victorian section covered. She reviewed the shots on the camera screen. They were good, better than good. She moved on. At around 8:30, she moved to a section she had noticed on her way in. An older section, earlier than Victorian, stones going back to the 1700s. Many of them tilted, some fallen, some so weathered the inscriptions were gone entirely. She set up her tripod between two large stone monuments. She was composing a shot looking east. The light was coming in at a low angle, catching the edge of the stones. She looked through the viewfinder. She composed the shot. She was about to take it when she saw something between two headstones, about 30 feet away, a shape low to the ground. She pulled back from the viewfinder. She looked directly. A child, sitting on the ground between two headstones, facing away from her, very still. Her first thought was that a family had arrived early, that someone had come before the gates opened in the same way she had, with permission, or without. She called out, "Hello, good morning." The child did not respond, did not move. She called again, nothing. She stood there for a moment, looking at the child. She thought about the site manager's contact number in her pocket. She thought about calling it. A child in the cemetery before it opened. Something was off. She called out again. "Hello, good morning. Are you okay there?" Nothing. She decided to approach. She left the tripod where it was. She walked toward the child slowly, deliberately, not wanting to startle them. She was about 15 feet away when she stopped. The child was sitting completely still, too still. Not the stillness of a child who was absorbed in something, the stillness of something that was not breathing. She watched for 5 or 6 seconds. No movement, no rise and fall of small shoulders, no shift of weight. She took another step, and another. Slowly. She did not want to startle a child in a cemetery at 8:30 in the morning. At 10 feet, she could see more clearly. The child was small, perhaps 5 or 6 years old. Dark clothing, hair that looked wrong in a way she could not explain. Not the light. Something else. She was close enough now to see the child's back clearly. She looked at it. She counted 5 seconds. There was no movement, not a breath, not a shift of weight. Not the unconscious micro-adjustments every living body made constantly. The tiny corrections of balance and muscle that happened below the level of thought. Nothing, completely still. Petra said her own name out loud. She said it later because she needed to hear a human voice. Her voice, any voice. She stepped forward. She reached out. She placed her hand on the child's shoulder. She expected resistance. There was none. Her hand went through air. No fabric, no shoulder, nothing beneath her fingers, just cold morning air and the space between two headstones. She pulled her hand back. She looked at the space between the stones. Empty. She looked at the ground, frost on the grass. A thin layer, undisturbed, not a single impression in it. No footprints. Nothing to suggest that anyone or anything had been sitting there. She stood there for a long time. Then she walked back to her tripod. She packed up her equipment. She walked to the gate. She called the site manager on the contact number she had been given. She said she had finished early and was leaving. She did not mention what she had seen. She sat in her car for 40 minutes before she trusted herself to drive. She sat there and thought about what had happened in a systematic way. The child she had seen, the contact she had made, the empty space, the undisturbed frost. She thought about each one carefully. She went through the rational explanations methodically. She could not find an arrangement of them that accounted for all 4 things simultaneously. She stopped trying after 30 minutes. She started the car. She drove home. She showed me the photographs she had taken that morning. She had taken 63 shots in the 2 hours before she saw the child. The photographs of the Victorian section were exactly what she had planned, exactly what she had gone there for. Beautiful. Then I got to the last photograph, the shot she had been composing when she saw the child. The one she had taken just before she looked through the viewfinder and saw the shape between the stones. In the photograph, between 2 headstones about 30 feet from where she was standing, there was a shape, low to the ground. She had not seen it when she composed the shot. She had been looking at the light, at the angle of the stones. She had not seen it, but the camera had. She showed me the photograph. I want to be careful about how I describe it. I am not going to tell you definitively what I saw in it. Between the two headstones, approximately 30 feet from where she had been standing, there was something low to the ground. Dark. The shape of it was not definitive. The light, the distance, the angle, certainty was impossible, but something was there. In the exact position, at the exact height, of a small child sitting between two headstones, facing away, just as she had described it. She has shown the photograph to 6 people who know cameras. Nobody has told her definitively what it is. Nobody has told her definitively what it is not. She has not submitted it for analysis. She told me she thought seriously about doing that. She knows people who do forensic image analysis. She could have asked. She decided she did not want an answer that was definitive in either direction. If it was definitively nothing, just shadow, just stone, then she would have to explain what she felt when she touched a shoulder that was not there. If it was definitively something, then she would have to live with what that meant. She decided she was more comfortable with not knowing. She said either outcome unsettled her. She has not been back to that cemetery. She still shoots cemetery photography. She said she will not let one experience take something she loves away from her. But she told me 2 things she does now that she did not do before. She reviews her shots on the camera screen every 20 minutes. And before she sets up the tripod, she walks the frame first. She walks to the position the camera will be aimed at and she looks at what is there. Before the camera looks. She said she wants to know what she is pointing it at. Before the camera sees something she doesn't. Story 3. The One Who Stayed. I want to be precise about this story because the man who told it to me is precise. His name is Daniel. He is a former police officer, 14 years on the force in a small town in the American Midwest. He retired on medical grounds not related to this incident. I mention that because he mentioned it. He wanted to be clear that what happened that night in October was not something that affected his ability to work. He continued working for 3 more years after it. He is not someone who tells stories for effect. He is not someone who embellishes. He told me this once, clearly and precisely, and said he would not discuss it again after that. He was working a night shift in a small town in the American Midwest. A Friday in late October, just after 2 a.m., a call came in. Report of a light in the municipal cemetery on the south side of town. A resident who lived across the road had seen what they described as a flashlight beam moving between the headstones. Vandalism was the concern. There had been 2 incidents at the cemetery earlier that year. Headstones damaged. Daniel took the call. He drove to the cemetery, parked on the road outside. It was a quiet night. Cold. Clear enough to see the stars above the tree line. The cemetery gates were visible from the car, closed. He got out, walked to the gates, locked. He checked his watch, 2:11 a.m. He walked the perimeter of the cemetery fence, wrought iron, 6 feet, running the full boundary. He checked for broken sections, for a gate that might have been left open or forced, for any point where someone could have entered. He found nothing. He went back to the main gate. He called through the bars. Police, anyone inside, identify yourself. He listened. Nothing. He waited 30 seconds. Called again. Nothing. He got back on his radio and called dispatch, asked for the key holder contact. Dispatch said they were looking for it. While he waited, he looked into the cemetery through the iron bars. The cemetery was laid out in a simple grid. Open grass for 40 feet from the gate, then the first row of headstones, then the second row behind that. He was looking at the second row when he saw the figure, standing between 2 headstones, completely still, facing the gate, facing him. He told dispatch to hold. He looked at the figure, the shape of a person, average height, dark clothing, standing directly between 2 headstones in the second row, facing the gate without moving. He called again. Police, identify yourself immediately. The figure did not move, did not respond, did not turn its head. He noted the time, 2:14 a.m. He requested backup. He stood at the gate and watched. For 6 minutes, the figure stood between those 2 headstones. It did not move. It did not shift its weight. It did not look away. He told me he has done a lot of things in 14 years that required him to hold himself steady. That 6 minutes was one of the harder ones. His backup arrived at 2:21 a.m. 2 officers, the 3 of them looked at the figure. The backup officers confirmed they could see it. They arranged for the key holder to be contacted. The key holder arrived at 2:38 a.m. A woman in her 60s. She had the key already in her hand when she got out of the car. She unlocked the gate without speaking. The 3 officers entered. Daniel went straight to the second row. He walked directly to the 2 headstones. The space between them was empty. The ground between them was undisturbed. He looked at both headstones. He looked at the ground in front of them. He looked at the row behind. Nothing. The 3 officers searched the cemetery. 4 acres, a grid pattern. They checked behind every significant structure, every tree large enough to conceal a person, every section. They used their torches. They called out. They took their time. Nobody was there. Nothing. No person, no evidence of recent presence. No disturbed ground, no dropped item, no sign that anyone had been in the cemetery at any point that night. Daniel told me the 3 of them stood in the second row after the search and looked at each other. A cemetery at 2:38 a.m. with no one in it and no explanation for what they had all seen. Nobody spoke for a moment. Then one of the backup officers said, "We all saw it." Silence. Nobody challenged it. Nobody offered an alternative. They all looked at the space between the 2 headstones where the figure had been standing. Then they filed out, and the key holder locked the gate behind them. They filed the report as suspicious activity reported. Attending officers observed figure between headstones in Section B, second row. Full search conducted. No individual located. No evidence of entry or exit. No vandalism or disturbance found. The original caller was contacted the following morning. They confirmed they had seen a moving light, a flashlight beam, they said, moving between the stones. Daniel had seen no light. No flashlight, no illumination of any kind. Just the figure, standing, facing him. He said he thought about the discrepancy for a long time. He said the caller may have seen something different, something else in the cemetery at the same time, or the caller may have misidentified what they saw. He said he does not know. He knows what he saw. He saw a figure between the headstones at 2:14 a.m. He watched it for 6 minutes. His backup confirmed it, and when they entered the cemetery, it was gone. He told me he has thought about it for a long time. He ran through the explanations the way he had been trained to. Someone who had entered the cemetery before the initial patrol, who had hidden during the search. In a cemetery with 4 acres and many structures, that was technically possible. But the fence perimeter had shown no signs of entry. The gate had been locked, and whatever he had observed had been standing in full view between 2 headstones for 6 minutes. It had not been hiding. It had been standing there, facing the gate, facing him. He said, "It knew I was watching." He said it quietly, like a conclusion he had come to slowly and reluctantly over a long period of time. He said, "Whatever was standing there knew I was watching it through that gate." He paused, and it let me watch for exactly as long as it wanted to. He said that is the part he cannot put down, not the disappearance, not the 3 officers standing in an empty cemetery at 2:38 a.m. with no explanation. The choice implied by what he saw. It stood there, it faced him, it let him watch for 6 minutes, and then it was done, and it was gone. He said he does not know what was standing in that cemetery at 2:14 a.m. on a Friday in October. He said he does not know what it was waiting for. He said he is not going to speculate, but he said one more thing before he closed the conversation. He said, "I've been in a lot of uncomfortable situations in 14 years. He paused. That was the only one where I felt like whatever I was dealing with was completely aware of me. Another pause. And completely indifferent to what I might do about it. It didn't matter that I was a police officer. It didn't matter that I had a radio and a car and backup on the way. None of that mattered to whatever was standing in that cemetery. It stood there for exactly as long as it chose to. And when it was done, it was simply gone. No sound, No movement, no explanation. Just gone. And then it was done. Whatever it was. He said goodnight. He ended the call. 3 cemeteries. 3 people who went in and came back different. Subscribe for more late night stories, a new one every week. Ray still walks past Calverton Cemetery sometimes. He nods at the gate. He never walks the Morrison path. Petra reviews every shot immediately after she takes it, before the camera sees something she doesn't. Daniel does not discuss it. He told me once, and that was that. And if you ever find yourself in a cemetery after dark, pay attention to what is facing you and what is not.